Thank
How
you
are
so
you, everybody?
much.
It is so good to be with you.
So good in beautiful Sarasota.
Oh man, Sarasota is amazing.
It is not an ugly city. It is not an ugly city, I'll say that.
It isn't. And we discovered Dutch food, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna move here now.
Der
That's where we're at.
Der Dutch. It was.
Yeah.
There's a cinnamon roll that, like, sometimes when I'm alone, I'll think about it. I'll think about that cinnamon roll, and it'll warm me up, the memories of it.
Any place where you can get breakfast, like eggs and biscuits and bacon, and a side of banana pudding, holler at your boy.
Which
That's
you
all
may
I'm
or
saying.
may not have done. Which you may or may not have done.
Which I definitely did.
You definitely did.
Yeah. Well, guys, we are so excited to be with you, and I hope you know how blessed you are to be at an amazing church like Grace. It is unbelievable. It's amazing. Is anybody in the room old enough to remember concerts? Anybody remember concerts? Yeah. They're coming back in Jesus' name, but they say at concerts that sometimes the front row is not the best seat because the sound kind of goes over you. And sometimes I think in churches like this, it feels like you get a front row seat to everything God is doing. And sometimes it becomes so common that the sound goes over you and you miss the beauty of what God is doing here. Listen, please never take this place for granted, because the things we take for granted have a tendency of exiting our lives. You are blessed to have the best pastors in the whole world. Can you honor them, everybody? They're amazing. I told Liz, I was like, look, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little intimidated because Pastor Chip is the smartest dude I know. He's so smart, he is. So like if you came tonight expecting some deep revelatory message,
we don't have it.
We don't have that.
Yeah,
we don't.
It's not really our thing. I have an undergraduate degree in music.
Yeah, that'll be good.
So follow your dreams, kids. I'm doing a lot with that.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And I did just finish a doctorate, but before you clap, I gotta say something. The truth is, I have half of a doctorate. And the reason I have half is I would go to lunch with your pastor and I would say, hey, I've gotta write a paper on this topic. Yeah. You know anything about that? And I would just hit record and eat chips and salsa. And then I would just write whatever he said, and your boy got straight A's, everybody. So I would like to present Pastor Chip half of my doctorate, giving him 2.5. And yeah.
Well, we are so excited to be here. Like he said, we are from Lakeland, Florida, and I think we have a picture of our family. Okay, so that's our family. We've been married 16 and a half years. We have 3 children. Our oldest son is going into his freshman year of high school. His name's Joey. Our middle son is Gavin. He's 11, going into middle school. And then our daughter, the expensive one, is going into 2nd grade. The boys are playing football, and that is a hugely new experience for me. It's dangerous. It scares me. And like, none of that ever happens at my daughter's dance recitals. So pray for us because football scares me. It's a little scary to me. But we're just honestly so honored to be here. It's been a joy for us to come into your Perspectives series and talk about marriage and relationships. It's kind of funny because traveling here, we were talking about this and we brought up something really cool. My parents are going to be celebrating their 50th anniversary, October 16th. So that is incredible, okay? And yeah, anytime you mention that, somebody has a reaction like, wow, well, why? Because it's not incredibly common anymore. So we just want to talk about some things that we can do to try to have these successful marriages, to have our own 50th one day. And if you're not married and you're in the room today, that's okay. Tuck this away, store it. Some of these principles are universal for friendships, things like that. And we're really going to go to God in one verse today and base everything out of this. It's Ephesians 5:21, and it just says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And we're going to unpack what all that means and what we can do to have successful, hopefully partially successful marriages.
Yeah. So that's our hope. So our hope is that you leave with some practical tools that'll help you in any relationship of your life, but specifically your marriage. The first thing that happy couples know is that marriage is a covenant. It's not a contract. Now, I want you to imagine something with me, okay? Imagine that today when you leave church, you leave the parking lot, and there's a normal path you take to go home. But what if I told you I had insider information that if you take the path you always take home, there's about a 50% chance you're going to be involved in a tragic, fatal car accident. But if you take another way home, it's a little bit harder, a little bit more challenging, takes a little bit longer to get there, but there's a 100% chance of success for you making it home safe. Who would be dumb enough to take the first path home? And you know what's funny is if you study the world and you study culture, marriage it's kind of a weird dying art. It really is. That's why when Liz says her parents are making it 50 years, it's like, it's weird for us. It's difficult to imagine that marriages can make it. Statistically, more than half of marriages end in divorce. And you know this is true. You know it's true because you've seen it in your life. Maybe you've walked through it or you know someone who's walked through it. So we can't do marriage the way the world does marriage. We have to do marriage a different way. We have to take a different path. And that path is God's path. And that pathway is something different than the world thinks about. When we think about marriage, often, unfortunately, we're programmed and conditioned to think of marriage as a contract. Okay, think about this for me, okay? Think about a contract that you've signed in your life. It could be a cell phone contract. It could be a lease on a house or a lease on a vehicle. You sign a contract. What does every contract have in common? It tells you that it's gonna tell you what your rights are. It's gonna tell you what your responsibilities are. And then at the end of the contract, there's what's called a dissolution clause. Dissolution means if we break the contract, what do we have to do? So with your cell phone, you have rights. You're gonna get cell phone coverage. You have responsibility. You have to pay $50 or $60 a month or whatever. And then if you should decide to break your contract, there's a fee you have to pay and you go your separate way. This is how the world tends to think when they think about marriage. Pay attention to any tabloid as you're leaving. It'll talk about these celebrities are getting divorced and did they have a prenup? And all the language they're talking about is contractual. Yeah. Who gets the kids for the weekend? Who gets the house? Who gets the car? It's all contractual. Biblically, though, marriage is a covenant. Right. A covenant is a sacred, holy commitment to one another made with God as a part. Now, let me say it to you like this. In a contract, we protect my rights. We limit my responsibilities. But in a covenant, I lay down my rights and I pick up responsibility. I'll say it to you like this. Some years ago, I was going to be preaching at our church on the topic of marriage. I love preaching. I've been preaching for years. And the truth is, whenever I get up to speak, I'm never more than like 80% prepared to speak. But there was this one week that I was going to be preaching on marriage and specifically love, and I was struggling with the language for it. I was like, how do I define this? Like, what is love? And brilliant philosophers for generations have wrestled with what is love. Everyone from Plato to Aristotle to Taylor Swift, they've all dealt with what is love. And so I'm wrestling with it, and it's Sunday morning. You know, church is coming like a freight train. And I don't even know how to define love. And so, I'm getting myself ready early in the morning, and Liz was still in bed because I'm more spiritual than she is. And I'm gonna go teach on love. And so she's half asleep, and I'm like, hey, babe, just for fun, like, what is love? And out of her half asleepness, she goes, you before me. And she rolled back over and went to sleep. I was like, if that's how smart you are when you were asleep, how smart are you when you're awake, right? Like, that's amazing. It's you before me. For so many of us, we have this misunderstanding of what love is in marriage. It's not just about my needs getting met. It's about serving one another. I lay down my rights and I pick up responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second point we want to talk to you about, the second tip that happy couples know is this. It's that we kill unrealistic expectation. We kill unrealistic expectation. And what does that mean? Well, a lot of us have expectations. Expectation is really just the way you think something will go. And a lot of times we don't realize we have expectation until they go unmet, don't we? And we go, oh, I didn't have an expectation for that. No, I'm cool, I'm chill. And then something goes away we don't want it to be. And we go, really did have a way I wanted that to go. Some of you have expectations for how you want to look, how you wanted your special days to go, different things. I personally, being a young, naive wife, had an expectation of how I thought the day our first child was born would go. I had seen a lot of pictures on social media of just beautiful, like angelic glowing, and mothers looking at perfect babies and just not a sheen of sweat on their little face, like a perfectly contoured, and that is not how it went for me at all. So it was, well, awful. And our first child was 9 pounds, 2 ounces, a big baby, a big old baby. And then also, by the way, side note, but after they were born, they had the nerve to look just like their dad and nothing like me. And I'm just like, you know what I mean? I did all the heavy lifting there, but anyway, it's fine. And so we're just working through that. But so we get there, I say we're in labor. I'm in labor, and we're having the baby, and it's stressful. At one point, I think my soul leaves my body. I'm just looking down, and I'm just like, what's going on? And we go to, you're gonna get mad, he's gonna get mad. We go to, the baby finally slips out, and Jason passes out.
It was a hard day for both of us.
Yeah. Jason passes out. No, I kid you not. I was like, are you kidding me right now? And so the nurses are cleaning the baby. They're doing all the good things. I love that. I'm pro that. And then there's 3 additional new nurses that have appeared, and they are down on the ground with Jason, and they are cooing over him. They are petting him.
It was traumatic.
Yeah, okay. They are wiping his brow, and I kid you not, I'm still laid up in the bed like this, and I hear one of them go, sir, can we get you some apple juice, sir? And I'm like, I would love a beverage. I don't know if we're taking orders. Like, I don't know what is this protocol? Like, I just didn't know if you had a baby and got juice. Like, I didn't know. I'd never done it. But it was not quite the way I had thought things would go. I mean, I eventually got cute pictures, but I'm going to be really honest. I don't even put up those first day pictures. I look like a swollen, like, when they recover those poor whales that have been caught in the nets on the beach. Like, I looked like that. I don't know where these women who get these shiny afterbirth photos are from. Like, it was not my experience. So expectation is crazy. And in marriage, we have some expectations that are good, that are healthy, right? Like that, we expect to be faithful to one another. We expect all these good things, but it can actually be quite detrimental in a relationship.
Yeah. Can you remember when you were single, for those of you who are married in the room, did you do this game where you would write down a list of all the things you wanted in a spouse, right? Certain way you want them to look, hopefully way that they'll take care of the kids or take care of the house or cook or clean, whatever. We all have a series of desires before we get married. If you can think back to middle school, maybe you shared your list with friends. And if you grew up going to a youth group, sometimes you prayed, your youth pastor challenged you, pray for the perfect spouse. And so you prayed, God, make him 6'5" and a point guard in the NBA. You had specific prayer requests, right? And you pray for these things, and then comes your wedding day. And let's be honest, the wedding day is the most unrealistic day of every couple's life. When we were the week before we got married, we went on a crash diet.
No.
You remember this?
I forgot about it till just this moment.
It was called the Sacred Heart Diet.
Yeah.
It's the diet made
cabbage soup.
Yeah,
it's basically cabbage soup is what it is.
It's a diet made to help people lose weight rapidly before heart surgery. And so I thought, that'll be good for us.
Yeah, that was good.
And so for a whole week, they say you can eat as much cabbage soup as you want. And after one bowl, you're like, that's all I want. Because you just can't handle it.
That's literally why you lose weight. Because it's actually a starvation.
So bad. Yeah. And then it was the night before our wedding, the diet is over, Liz has gone somewhere, and I ordered a whole cheese pizza. I felt like Kevin McAllister on Home Alone, a whole cheese pizza to myself.
Yeah.
And I ate the whole thing. And so think about your wedding day. It's so unrealistic. You crash diet to lose weight. Women are wearing so much makeup, they look like they lost a paintball fight. It's just other women. And you're dressed up perfect, and then you have this beautiful wedding day, and then sometimes you go away on a honeymoon, which is unrealistic because you don't do that often in your life. And so the whole day is set up unrealistically to begin with. And then there's the wedding ceremony. And so what happens is the bride comes walking down the aisle. She is the center of attention. And when she walks forward, she carries with her hopes and dreams for what the wedding will look like. The groom stands at the front awaiting his bride with hopes and dreams. And then they exchange vows and they exchange rings. And unbeknownst to them, they also exchange their hopes and dreams for expectations. Yeah. And they lay the expectations on the back of their new spouse, and it's heavy. Yeah. Let me tell you what it does. When you have expectations in a marriage, it creates a debt and a debtor relationship. Yeah. So what tends to happen is if I had expectations of my wife, let's just say to cook a meal every night for dinner, hypothetically, if that was an expectation I had of my wife, if she's amazing, if she does it over and over and over without missing a beat, if she puts out gourmet Wolfgang Puck style meals in front of me every single night, all she's ever done is repaid the debt. All she's ever done with me is gotten herself back to zero or even. So what happens when we lay expectations on our spouse is we rob them of the opportunity to bless us in our marriage. Can I tell you what happens when we drop expectations? Everything becomes a blessing. You did the laundry? You cleaned? You did this for me? Yeah. It elevates the status of your spouse in your heart. Expectations are to marriage what cancer is to the body. It slowly erodes it from the inside out.
Yeah, we could say it like this. Expectation says you owe me, but love says you before me. It's just a sort of a way of twisting that to where you wind up happier, more fulfilled, and not having those burdens on one another. Yeah. Well, the third thing is this. We fight for our marriage, not we fight in our marriage. We kind of laughed because every time we go to speak on marriage, we wind up having a really bad fight that week. And so it's always about something incredibly dumb. But fights in marriage are something we want to work to get rid of, obviously. And one of the key ways we all know to do that is communication. So we had looked into, like with communication, like the love languages. I don't know if you've heard of the 5 love languages, okay? Great book, Dr. Gary Chapman. And there's 5 ways that people give and receive love. They are physical touch, acts of service, quality time, gifts, and
words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation. Thank you. I affirm that for you. And so, so everybody takes these tests. They wind up finding out their love language, and it's a good thing, except a lot of people stop once they find out their love language. So it's like, this is how I like love, good for me. You know, like I found out that my love language is gifts, which sounds super petty, and it's not. I just mean that, like, if you go somewhere and you thought of me, it could have been 50 cents, but it means a lot to me. And my secondary is acts of service. Like, nothing to me is more attractive than this man rolling by with the laundry basket. And he's like, baby, I did the laundry. I'm like, that is my baby daddy right there. That is my man.
I've started doing the laundry 2-3 times a day, honestly, you know, just
not even washing stuff, just walking by, actually, yeah.
So your top 2 are gifts?
Gifts and acts of service.
Yeah, my top 2 are physical touch and then touch me again, you know what I'm saying? It's, that's... We've enjoyed our last time
Why
speaking
do you
at
make
Grace.
it weird? Why do you make it weird?
It's always weird.
You
I don't
make
know.
it super weird. The problem is a lot of people only find out their gift. Okay, that's the same across the board, whether it's Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, whatever personality test you take. It doesn't work if you only stop and find out the way you want to receive. So a message, right, isn't a message unless it's sent and received. Do you all have a person in your life who's the worst caller backer or texter backer? I have a girl, I'm not even joking, I'm thinking of her face. It's lovely, but my God, she can't text, okay? So I will say, honey, I sent you a text, and did you get it? And I'll be like, hey, remember that? I sent you a text. And then she'll write, I kid you not, almost every time, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I thought I sent this. Or she'll write, I replied in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, girl, that's on me, that I was not in your head to get that message. Like, what? Messages don't work that way, right? It only works if it's both sent and received. It's the same way with love. If I only stop to say, this is how I want to receive love, well, that doesn't translate if we're not then finding out what our partner also wants to receive in love.
It's so good. And we said earlier that marriage is a covenant. And you need to know this about covenants. The only exit clause to a covenant is what you say in a wedding, which is till death do us part. So if you're going to be in a marriage till death do us part, you need to understand that we're going to have to work through some stuff. We're going to see the world differently sometimes. We're gonna have to make the decision to work through our issues. Now, one of the things I've learned, both from almost 17 years of marriage, but also from counseling hundreds of people, is that people tend to disagree or argue in two different ways. And until you can identify this, and until you can do something to change it, what tends to happen is it has this way of kind of slowly eroding away at your communication in marriage. In my opinion, there's two different types of people when it comes to conflict. There's what I call an internalizer, and there's what I call a short account person. In most marriages, not all, but in most marriages, it feels like there's one of each in the marriage. The internalizer is the person who, whenever something happens that bothers them, if it's not that big of a deal, they just kind of take it and say, not that big of a deal, and they internalize it. And they push it down, and they push it down. So the illustration I would come up with is if there was a sock on the floor, if Liz left a sock on the floor, I'm an internalizer. I might see the sock on the floor and be like, it's kind of annoying, but really not that big of a deal. And we shove it down, and we shove it down. It's not that big of a deal, but every once in a while, that pile gets so big, it's like it gets so full inside that you see something insignificant, like a sock on the floor, or they left a light on in the closet. And what happens is you start arguing, and then all of a sudden, this volcanic eruption of all the stuff from the last few months come out. And 6 months ago, you left your sock on the floor. Can you see how detrimental that is in an argument?
As a disclaimer, I would never leave my sock on the floor. That's you. So there's the internalizer, the pusher downer. I'm what you would call the short account person, which means we kind of tell you immediately what we feel, so you're never really wondering what we feel. But if we blow up, we get past it very quick. The benefits are we don't hold grudges. The negatives are it can come across as nagging because you are constantly bringing up every little thing. It's like, hey, there was the sock. Oh, a second sock. Oh, what's going on, you know? And the sock is usually really close to the hamper too. That's the stressful part. It's like just a few more feet, buddy.
So here's the observation. It's important to know who you are and how you handle conflict. And the reason is, if you're in a covenant marriage till death do us part, we've got to learn how to cross the bridge to communicate with each other. You see, communication only happens when a message is sent and when a message is received. And I wonder how many of us, if we're honest, we don't really know how to handle conflict. So we dig our heels in. We only show love the way that we want to receive love. We don't communicate well. We're not communicating in a way that our spouse understands. And so what we do is we find ourselves stranded across a bridge, across a gulf from each other, instead of making the intentional decision to move towards each other.
Yeah, and I think this is important, and why the verse we talked about at the beginning, it says, Ephesians 5:21 says, submit to one another. I think a lot of times in maybe in church circles, but maybe even historically, that has been somewhat abused and somewhat misconstrued. It was a fearful thing. It was, I have to submit, and that scares me. But when we think about submitting to one another, in those verses, I mean, Paul's talking to us and saying, you know, women submit to your wives, and that always scared me initially. I was like, oh, I don't know, do I want to do that? And it's not, because it's a mutual submission. And then after that, in the next 6 verses, he talks to men and says, men, love your wives as Christ loved the church. I mean, how did Christ love the church? Christ died for the church. I don't have fear in submission to someone who is willing to put their life down for me. And it's not something we have to fear when it's mutual. It's not a race to the top. It's actually a race to the bottom. And that if love is you before me and it's mutual, then I'm not afraid, because we're trying to outdo one another in love and service.
I've heard it said that the best marriages are 2 servants in love. And so we've been saying all this whole conversation that marriage, and really what love is love is you before me. You need to understand that if we're fighting for our marriage, not in our marriage, there's something we need to understand. Fighting in marriage says me before you. It's my needs ahead of you. It's my desires ahead of yours. But fighting for marriage, no, it says you before me. I choose to honor you. And in a world where it's a race to the top, marriage is actually a race to the bottom. It's to see who can outserve one another. Every once in a while, I'll do premarital counseling with a couple, and I'll say that to them. Marriage is a covenant. It's got to learn how to handle your issues. And really, the goal is to outserve one another. And you can almost see, like a deer in the headlights. They're like, I don't really want to do that. My response is always the same. It is so beautiful when you serve selflessly, and you know that for the rest of your life, you're partnered with someone who's making it the game of their life to also outserve you. Liz told you earlier about her parents coming up on 50 years of their anniversary. I have had some really cool speaking opportunities really throughout my whole life, but possibly the greatest speaking engagement I ever had was a few years ago. My grandparents, I called them Meemaw and Papaw, and Meemaw and Papaw were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary, 60 years. As their grandson and as a pastor, they said, would you officiate, our rededication ceremony? And I was like, well, sure. I mean, if you think you're gonna make it. And so I just said, if you think the marriage is gonna last. And so I said, I'll do that for you. And so I did it. And it was the most beautiful, sweet thing. I walked them through the vows, and I would always add again, I take you again to be my lawfully wedded wife, for better or worse, richer or poorer, sickness and in health, till death do us part. And then I said, Papa, again, you may kiss your bride. And I was right there. Like, it's weird being the minister at a wedding because you're right there when they're kissing each other, and Papa leans over and he kisses her, and it's kind of weird because it's your grandparents, but it's beautiful at the same time. And then their lips unlocked, and there was this weird drool chain between them, and I'm like, awkward. And then I walked over to Liz after it, and I was like, I want that. The marriage, not the chain. I want that. Like, I want that. Well, then a couple of years ago on a Sunday morning, we were right at the very beginning, like the first notes of the first song of our worship service that our church was starting. And I got a text from my dad that said, your Meemaw just stepped into heaven. And so I flew out that week to Dallas, and I walked with my Papa down the aisle for the first time that he would see his bride of 61 and a half years lying in a coffin. And I walked down with him not knowing what he would say. And he saw her, and he said, there's my girlfriend. 61 and a half years, but not long enough. That's what I want. And that's what I want for you. Listen, I really believe that your marriage can be the greatest testimony that you have to the whole world. In a world where marriages are dropping like flies, where every tabloid has the headline of this celebrity or that celebrity who isn't making it and how they're splitting up the assets, how amazing would it be if your story for the generations to come, or when we said till death do us part, we meant till death do us part. So I thought it would be amazing as we close, if we could stand together and pray a blessing over all the marriages. And maybe you're here today and you're not married. This is advice that's godly to put away in the medicine cabinet of your life. Maybe you find yourself in marriage and you find it good, or you find yourself struggling. God can step in and God can help you take it to the next level. Maybe you find yourself on the other side of marriage. You've made some mistakes, and I just really do believe that we serve a God who restores. Yes. And so I would love if we could all stand together now, and let's pray and let's receive the blessing of God in our marriages.
Lord, I just thank you that in a day and age where people are so lost, so desperate and lonely, we can show your light and your love, that our marriages would make it and last, not because we're good, but because you are at the center of them. I pray that testimony for those in this room. I pray for those waiting on that spouse, God, that you would renew them as they wait on you, that you would bring the right person in their life. I pray for those who find themselves single again, God, that today you would encourage hearts, that you would bring restoration to families. In the name of Jesus, we ask for miracles today. And God, we just ask that today you would help us to just put a couple little things, a couple small changes into place, but we see big growth in our marriages so that one day we can stand, celebrate, and give you honor for the faithfulness that you have shown us in our marriages and in our lives.